So a great little interview today with Lee Camp and Cheri Honkala. Cheri Honkala ran as a vice presidential candidate with Dr. Jill Stein quite a few years ago. She's been doing for the last 30 years. She has a Poor People's Army, which is addressing housing in a more unconventional way, not like the non-profit industrial complex does, which takes money from Walmart and all kinds of sources which are sort of almost the opposite to, they're actually anti-people, these different corporations. And so Cheri Honkala is doing something different, which is basically she's taking over abandoned homes, and there's for every one homeless person in Philadelphia, there are 10 abandoned houses that have no one in them, and they've been either bought up by rich people and they're waiting for the market prices to go up, or they have a friend that's comes over for a few weeks every year or something. Who knows what's going on there? But and there's also a lot of homes that are owned by HUD, I think, and so there are a lot of homeless people in Philadelphia. And there's a real crisis that's coming, of course, when the eviction ban ends. Of course, there are lots of, as Cheri Honkala says, lots of slumlords that. They completely ignore the eviction ban anyway, and I've seen people being evicted in San Francisco in the middle of a pandemic. So this is a failed state. The US is a failed state, and what's happening all over the place in the United States is just appalling, and that's neoliberalism. And as Lenin said, fascism is capitalism in decay, and neoliberalism is an expression of fascism. He didn't necessarily say that. Ajama Baraka from the Black Alliance for Peace said, neoliberalism is an expression of fascism. So, the U.S. is a failed state. It's abandoned its people, and most of its people, and it's, of course, rich people and the political class, the oligarchy, the 1%. They're just fine, thank you very much. But the rest of the United States citizens are in dire straits as the COVID-19 continues, and it was bad before COVID-19, and this is being used as an opportunity to rake in the dollars for the capitalist class. So anyway, Cheri Honkala talks about this with Lee Camp about the Poor People's Army, and she said, it's about time that people take back, just because they don't need any more studies about homelessness. The capitalist class, the kleptocracy, the corporate class are not going to do anything to address this situation. They're basically leaving people to die in the cold. And so she said it's time for people to take back the power. Of course, that is absolutely true. And she said she learned things from the Zapatistas. She learned things from various other movements on the planet. And this is how she is responding. And they've been doing this for the last 30 years. So anyway, it's a really good interview. And I thought about editing some of it, but the whole interview is actually really informative and inspiring, and also appalling at the same time. It's appalling because this is completely avoidable. If you know anything about the sovereign economy, which of course is still involved in a capitalist system, but something could be done about this right now if you understand MMT, learn MMT, the hashtag. But it just shows that capitalism, it's end-stage capitalism, and it has to end. And neoliberalism is a scourge. It's anti-people. It is appalling, and it has to end. And so it's time for, the people to take back the power. And I would say that Cheri Honkala is probably socialist. I think that Lee Camp is probably socialist, or at least socialist-leaning. And this is something that we all need to think about, being at least anti-capitalist anyway. We have to be anti-capitalist because capitalism is ecocidal, it is anti-people, and it is an end stage, and nothing good has really come of it, and nothing good is going to come of it. It's only going to force us closer and closer to annihilation through either the climate crisis or imperialist endeavors that lead to mutually assured destruction, which is what is happening as we speak with the Biden administration and their push for war against Russia and China. Capitalism is inextricably linked with imperialism. So we need to understand that and then act on that. And it's good to support groups like this, organizations like this, the Poor People's Army, because they are working outside of the duopoly, outside of the non-profit industrial complex, which has its own corruption and its own sort of its own self-censorship because of the where it's getting its funding and all that kind of thing. And this is just going to go round and around and around unless there is, as Cheri Honkala mentioned, and I've mentioned this quote before, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, as Audre Lorde said one day, the writer. So anyway, and activist. So anyway, let's do what we can to support these various types of organizations that are working outside and are actually helping people come closer to a socialist society, or a socialist-leaning society, or at least anti-capitalist. And that's what we need. We need people to wake up that this system is broken, and it is working fine for the political class. The 1% is working totally fine for corporations, and that's what it's meant to be doing. And it's not working for the people. So all power to the people. I hope you enjoy this interview. Thanks for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. This is, believe it or not, this is summer in Tasmania. And I love it here. So till next time, bye for now.
The Poor People's Army is really incredible. If you want to just tell people, the uninitiated, what it is.
Yeah. So we're a multiracial, intergenerational group of poor and homeless families from across the country that have moved away from the nonprofit industrial complex form of organizations and modeled ourselves more similar, if that's a sentence, to other peasant movements in different parts of the world, and in particular the Zapatistas and Chiapas.
That's it's excellent. And I know that something you're really working on right now is for helping people who are unhoused. Am I correct? You're reclaiming houses that have been that have either been left or people have been evicted from. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, we've been doing it for 30 years.
Okay, I'm a little late to the party, I guess.
But, most of the people that, I shouldn't say most, but a great deal of the people that are actually doing housing takeovers in this country, some of our folks have taught them how to do that.
Yep.
And we're some of the pioneers of that process. So, but we are just totally amazed because we're in over 30 properties right now, and there's been absolutely no national media coverage of it. And we know that
you're probably used to that. You're probably used to the media trying to ignore you.
Yeah. But in Philadelphia, there's 10 abandoned properties for every homeless person. And so we don't think we need another study, or we don't need to get in buses and go to Congress and lobby the wall.
Well, just to,
it's going to happen.
Just to repeat that, so people realize, really let it sink in. 10 abandoned properties or empty properties for every single person who could use a house or a roof over their head, and it's just phenomenal the way this socioeconomic system forces people out of shelters and leaves them sitting empty, often owned by banks. But of course, during the foreclosure crisis, they kicked people out even though they couldn't prove that the banks owned the properties. And it's just a completely inefficient, and it's a crime against humanity to have so many people without homes while these properties sit empty. Yeah.
And it's just crazy because I've been doing this for a very long time. And so we were really excited recently that the National Lawyers Guild came out with a national statement in support of us, because many attorneys will tell you that many, homeless entities now that are supposed to help homeless people are supported by so many banks and corporations that they're finding it difficult to support people that do this kind of work. So back in the day, we used to have like tons of lawyers outside abandoned properties that we took over. And now we're lucky if we find one at any given moment. So that's a scary thing, is to be, we know from one of our attorneys that the feds, the sheriff's department, and the East detectives are meeting on a regular basis about us.
Wow, that's incredible. You do have some support from the National Lawyers Guild or something?
Yeah, they put out the statement, in support of us, and they're trying to find lawyers on the ground. We're working with one lawyer and his some law students. And he is working outside of some of the homeless organizations in Philadelphia because there's a conflict of interest because they receive money from HUD and from other kinds of other corporations. So, but he thinks that what we're doing is important, and so he is, as an individual, supporting us in this process. And, we're modern day, fugitives. I know at any given moment they could decide that they're going to move on any of these houses, or they can indict me. And that'll be a very different situation. Right now we have 3 cases in federal court, and we're emergency federal injunctions that we filed ourselves. And so when those things go to court, things could be a very different situation.
Wow. This also goes to show how our laws are designed by the rich ruling powers. What you're doing is illegal, but it's who wrote these laws. It was rich white men protecting their property who wrote these laws, not allowing people to have housing. You said you've been doing this for 30 years. In the past, or maybe currently, have they in Philadelphia, have they been violently evicting people? How do they normally deal with it?
Well, there's several different levels, and in the hood, that's why for us, we think it's crazy when people get excited about a moratorium on evictions, because we know that both the police and slumlords do whatever the hell they want at any given time. They don't, listen to laws. And so we were surprised last week in the middle of a storm that one of the slumlords, shall I say, Housing and Urban Development, which is under, the country is under a federal moratorium on evictions, and Housing and Urban Development went and put an eviction notice on one of our family's houses that has, a baby in the house and women and other children. So we made a bunch of noise about it, and filed another federal emergency temporary injunction in federal court. And by the way, when you file something in federal court, it's $400 a pop.
Wow.
So, money is definitely needed. But I think that they're just trying to, they're trying to scare us, wear us out, because they know that we have no intentions of ever stopping. We intend to end homelessness by something really, really interesting process, which is just to house families. And so we're literally teaching people all over the country. We're holding Zooms. We're meeting with people in person, socially distancing, and teaching people how to take over abandoned properties. And that's how we're going to end homelessness in this country, is when we decide we're done with it, that all they care about is luxury units, and they don't give a damn if people freeze to death out on the streets, and they don't care if they die from COVID-19 or anything else. And when we just decide, we're done, and we, move families into abandoned properties across this entire country, then we'll end homelessness. But we have no faith that either the Republican or the Democratic Party is going to decide this is it. We're going to have zero tolerance on homelessness. Haven't seen it, never will.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it also shows what a revolutionary act it is, because, if this does keep catching on, and if people stop to think about it and stop to think about which side they're on and stop to think about why they believe in these, laws. I've heard it termed lawfare, where they, drag you into court and exhaust your funds and everything. It's basically warfare via the courts. And and basically why do we live this way in this socioeconomic system that exploits people and leaves them without homes, and we're on so many levels we're seeing harm and I don't know, war done against poor people. They have these, what do they call them? Discomfort architecture now, where they have high pitched noises and things to stop homeless people from being able to stay there, and
swivel benches.
Yeah, the angled bench, so you can't sit on it, or God,
you can't lie on it. None of these things. And the thing that's so ridiculous, and is actually not funny, is the fact that every day, every year, people die, and they die right outside tons of abandoned properties. And if we take a page from history from Harriet Tubman, and when she said, I could have freed a lot more slaves if they had only known that they were slaves, the same goes for homeless people. I don't get it. When my son was 9 years old, my morals and values changed about what was okay and not okay to do. And so when we broke into our very first HUD property when Mark was 9 years old, in order to keep ourselves from freezing to death and me from having my kid taken away from me, there was no turning back ever. And I think that more and more we have to figure out what's wrong with us as a society when there's more abandoned properties than there are homeless people, that we continue to buy into this whole hype that we have to do another study. We have to wait until people are housing ready. We have to wait until money is allocated. Well, that's all good and fine if they're not talking about your family, your kids. And so we've instituted our own zero tolerance, and we're at war, and we will teach people across this country how to take properties and house their families in these abandoned properties in an effort to keep their families alive.
Yes, well, I mean, it really is a horror show. You mentioned our two failed political parties that can't seem to do anything about it, although I think they are getting ready to do a study. They're going to do another study soon. I know you got to see this firsthand when you ran for vice president and other offices, but how they sideline people who are not within the two corporate parties, how they stop media coverage, how they stop ballot access. I mean, what did you walk away from all that from that run with?
Well, I think it was incredibly important, and I'm glad I did it. And I would encourage people to run as a third-party candidate in this country, because we're embarrassing to the rest of the world that we can't get beyond Pepsi and Coke, and we really have to. But I mean, little did I know that after I ran for vice president, that every parking ticket I've ever had in my life, I would wake up every morning with 200 emails, and that I would have, different, both the Republican and the Democratic Party, hacking into my Facebook and in my emails, and doing all of these horrible things. But anyway, I'm still glad that I did it. That's the other difficult thing that we're working with poor and homeless families to understand, that how many more years are we going to have people get in buses and go to Washington, D.C., or go to Harrisburg or wherever their capital is, and ask people permission to expand housing programs, to put a house over their child's head. I think now is the time that we have to move away from that, because the record numbers of particularly people of color that are dying because of COVID-19. And it'll be interesting to find out how many people were, when people talk about socially distancing, it's very difficult to do when you're living in a homeless encampment. It's very difficult to do when you're living out on the avenue. and you have to spend money to go get masks or whatever, you're going to figure out how to use that money to eat and take care of your family. So, we think people need to tap into the fact that they do matter, they deserve to live, and it's only a question of organization. And once we develop the political will in the organization, we're going to begin to house ourselves and take back all the basic necessities of life. And then hopefully in our lifetime, Lee, we'll see whether it's the Green Party or whatever independent political party in this country that becomes real. Because but this next year is going to be frightening with, Walmart, giving record numbers of money to Black Lives Matter and the Ford Foundation, all these different foundations that are, funding anti-poverty work and, funding Black Lives Matter, all these different kinds of important issues right now that need to be separate of corporations and banks.
That's a great point. I mean, I'm sure you get sick of all these. It's kind of like virtue signaling by corporate America, where they act like they're actually doing something for poor people, for people of color, for those who are struggling. And in fact, it's almost worse than not doing anything, because they're making people think that they're somehow helping those who are struggling.
Yeah, I mean, it's devastating. At one point, at one point, I was like, myself and other members of the organization were like poster children, and we were on all of these different magazines, and we went to these duty-free shops, and we, let's just say a very big, powerful foundation, the Ford Foundation. Anyway, flew us around the country. And this is when I was still young and ignorant. Mm-hmm. And then I realized when they told me, you can't do this, you can't do that. And one of the number one things that you can't do is you can't, participate openly in independent politics. Then our relationship had to end. And so I know that I will never be on the cover of Life magazine, CNN, but I'll be on Lee Camp's show, and that matters much more.
Yeah, I mean, we get far more viewers anyway, so. Yeah.
It's a better show.
Speaking of that, have you dealt with, because you put up, you guys, Poor People's Army puts up videos of, actions or people that, talking about what they need, talking about inequality. Have you experienced any of this, suppression, censorship? Because it's coming for all of us.
Yes, very much so. And, I would, my son, Mark Weber, who is an actor, he has decided that he's so furious about this issue that this is going to be one of the things like he spends the rest of his life working on is that people in the progressive movement and the nonprofit industrial complex that get this money from Walmart, Ford Foundations, on and on and on, are also participating in suppressing people's voices that are not talking the main line, that are not talking Republican Democratic Party politics. And I was like, oh, that can't be. But if you look up Cheri Honkala, for example, they've pretty much scrubbed most of my history from the internet. And so, there's one good thing about Hollywood, right? And my son having his own resources and, being a formerly homeless kid, is he intends to, after another project this next year, really begin to work with people that are serious about independent media, independent politics, independent everything in this country. And until we get serious about an independent funding stream, independent media, all of those kinds of things, they're going to continue to hide us, suppress us, because the masters never funded, the dismantling of their house. And
Right.
they're not going to do that. They're not going to do it this time. They might let people go, and be a little bit of the loyal opposition. But ultimately, they can take any one of us out of the game at any given point. And he understands that. He understands the importance that the role of the North Star played during slavery. Right now, things like your show and anything that strikes lifting up independent voices is where things are at right now. Even more important than the taking over our houses, because the more that we can reach as many people as possible with a different ideas and a different way of looking at the world, and getting the hell off of this treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the people that are doing this so-called revolutionary work that's out here, it's ridiculous. It's like, they write a foundation grant for freedom. And we understand people got to pay their rent. They got to pay their mortgage. They got to do these kinds of things. But we need a whole different way of operating in this world. And that's one of real mutual aid, is making sure that we can all live and survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly didn't take any oath to poverty. But this idea that there's going to be affluent revolutionaries is ridiculous.
Yeah. Someone was asking how they could learn more or get involved. What are the best places to go to?
Well, the best thing to do is to go to www.poorpeoplesarmy.com. We do boot camps on a regular basis, both in person, more when we've got a hold of the pandemic. And then they can also, we do trainings online as well, Zoom boot camps. We were really excited to link up with folks that are want to do similar work in Appalachia today. And we've recently done, trainings in both Baltimore, in Louisville, Kentucky, Texas, you name it. We can't, with the climate crisis and with corporations just, really, supporting fascism in our country, we can't afford to just do things like it's the 1960s or the 70s. We have to have a new way of organizing. And that means having a people-centered human rights approach. Mm-hmm. We got to develop courage and just take all this shit back. That's what we got to do.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. But
it's out there.
But I think part of the reason what you're doing is so important is beyond just those 30 spaces, is the symbol it represents of fuck this, fuck your stupid corporate laws on property rights. There are empty houses that are not being used. We're not violently kicking people out of their homes. We're just going into a space that is available to house someone. And that is how our system should work. Spaces that are available to house people should be used to house people. It is that simple. I mean, it's kind of like you're going by a law of what people should feel in their hearts rather than the garbage laws that have been put forward to oppress people. And that sets a model and an example that is far more powerful than just those 30 spaces.
Yeah, and we're doing something else also that's very dangerous, which is we're calling out the faith community, unions, shelters, homeless organizations, because we want people to take a position. Where are the hundreds of churches in Pennsylvania?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we're not asking you to open the doors, but we are asking you to take a public moral position.
Yeah.
In support of these 30 families. If you are not going to let these families live in your church or your home, And they're in danger of dying during the pandemic or freezing to death in the winter. And you can't come out publicly and support, something's wrong.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I like to say the same thing about these garbage politicians when they claim, oh, we wanted to help people, but we couldn't get the bill through Congress. It's like, if that were, let's assume for the sake of argument, that's true, then they should be speaking about it every day. Let's see Biden giving a speech every day about how many empty houses there are sitting around the country, or how ridiculous it is that in the richest country in the world, you have people fucking freezing on the streets. I mean, at least they could have at least a leg to stand on about, oh, we tried. But when they're not even giving those speeches, they're not even saying that. Like you said, the churches could be coming forward and talking about it and endorsing it, and they aren't for the most part. Like, that would make a massive difference. I mean, Trump proved to us how much the bully pulpit can be used for, how much a Twitter account can be used for, and it's just not being done.
Yeah, and it was amazing because this is where Biden's headquarters were, and there was homeless encampment on the Parkway, which was literally 2 blocks from his national headquarters, and no staff person from the Biden campaign ever journeyed out the 2 blocks away to talk to any of the homeless families that were living on the Parkway. So, we're not, we're just not going to wait for them anymore. Staying alive, eating, feeding, taking care of our families, those things are not up for negotiations. And, the sheriff's department, the feds, and the East Detectives Unit can continue to have meetings about us. And we really need the public to understand just how scary that is. Because we know they're not meeting to talk about, giving us a citation, an award. They're
Right.
making a plan. They're making a plan to move on 30 families.
Yeah.
So people have to step forward, say something, do something. Just like the peasants in Chiapas and the Zapatistas, they understood that unless they could break their isolation of just being, poor peasants in Mexico, and link up with people across Mexico and across the world, and shine a light on the inhumane conditions that, they could have been wiped off the face of the earth. And that's what we need people to understand how serious this is, how it has implications for poor families and homeless families. I mean, the millions and millions and millions of people that didn't pay rent in September, those evictions are coming. And either we're going to house them or we're just going to let this tsunami happen.
Yeah, well, 30 or 40 million people are facing eviction. I mean, it's and the whole hiatus on rent or whatever on eviction. Well, hiatus on evictions. They're not stopping the amount that these people owe from building up. So if they can't pay it now, you think the moment they remove the ban on evictions that people will suddenly have thousands upon thousands of dollars of back rent? It's impossible. As we mentioned, people who want to learn more or help out, poorpeoplesarmy.com is where to go. Anything else?
I would just say thanks, Lee. This is an important show. Join, enlist today. You never know when you're going to be called on.
Thank you so much, Cheri. Keep fighting. Stay safe.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, everything she was saying is just so important. Standing up, fighting back. I've done articles and things about how people should be able to live in the empty homes littering our landscape. I mean, we have whole cities that are increasingly becoming just. Thank you, RCM. Increasingly becoming just empty spaces that are not being used. I mean, Manhattan, I used to live in New York City. Manhattan, the actual borough of Manhattan, as opposed to Brooklyn and Queens, etc. But Manhattan, the lower Manhattan, is increasingly too expensive for anyone who works in Manhattan, unless you're a hedge fund manager, increasingly too expensive for people to live there. So all of the workers come into Manhattan on work days. I mean, I'm talking pre-pandemic. I don't know how it is now, but all the workers come into Manhattan, travel like an hour by train to work in Manhattan, and they all get the fuck out another hour by train, many going to New Jersey, many going to Connecticut. They're just leaving because no one can afford to fucking live there. But many of the places aren't even really, there's not actually people in them. It's like Saudi princes that just fucking own, they own a half a floor just in case someone, one of their friends wants to stay there for a night, a year. It's just amazing how empty our cities are becoming because the incredibly rich are just buying up these spaces. They're also buying up land. Bill Gates is now the number one owner of farmland or farmable land in America, number one or two, I think. Ted Turner, the former the guy who founded CNN, owns enough land to equal the size of Delaware. Ted Turner himself owns a Delaware of America, and he is the second biggest landowner in America. So there's someone else with another Delaware of land. What I was talking about with Bill Gates was farmable land, slightly different, but still tons of land. People, the rich are buying this stuff up. I mean, imagine if Jeff Bezos decided he wanted to buy up as much land as possible. He could buy fucking half of America without denting his fucking accounts. It's fucking insane. The inequality in this country is just destroying people.
Joe.
Yes, sir.
We're out here in Philadelphia. You're homeless. Tell me about it.
Most days it's pretty bad. Some days it's a little better than most, but it's never good. Today's been a bad day. It's cold, wet. That makes it bad, the wet and cold. But yeah, hopefully it won't be like this for long, and can get through this.
Well, you're going into winter. It's going to be cold and wet.
Yes.
And you're sleeping outside?
Yeah, I've been sleeping outside.
How do you do it?
Well, the shelters are really bad. If you actually can get in there, you will come out with bugs and stuff, so you don't even do it. So it's better outside. I got a sleeping bag, that helps. I don't know. That's actually one of the not so bad parts about it is you can just find a place to sleep and go to sleep. It's really not that bad. That's probably the only decent part about it all is that you pretty much, you're sleeping, so it really don't matter. As long as you get somewhere safe and dry. It's really nowhere warm at this time of year, but it's really not that bad. It's like camping out, I just wish everybody would be happy. That would be a good wish. That's pretty much it. I guess everything would just go well after that if everyone was happy.